The rain fell in sheets that evening, turning the world into a blur of gray. Jackson Miller stood frozen in the middle of the road, his heart pounding as the headlights of an oncoming truck bore down on the small figure in a pink raincoat. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not the groceries scattered across the wet pavement, not the rain soaking through his clothes, not even his own safety. Only the little girl, paralyzed with fear in the path of certain tragedy. What happened in those next few seconds would change the lives of 3 people forever. But why would a struggling single father refuse the grateful mother's money? And how could this split-second decision lead to something neither of them ever expected? If you're touched by this story of courage, sacrifice, and unexpected connections, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that remind us of the extraordinary moments hiding in ordinary lives. Jackson Miller hadn't planned on being a hero that rainy Tuesday evening. At 46, his days followed a predictable rhythm: wake up at 5:30, make breakfast for his 14-year-old son Ethan, drop him at school, work his shift at the construction company, pick up groceries, make dinner, help with homework, and collapse into bed. Rinse and repeat. The routine had been his anchor since his wife Marie died of cancer 3 years ago. The rain had started just as he left the grocery store, paper bags clutched awkwardly against his chest. He'd forgotten his reusable bags again. Marie would have teased him about that. He was halfway across the parking lot when he heard the scream. "Sara! Sara! Stop!" Jackson turned to see a little girl, no more than 10 years old, chasing after a small dog that had broken free from its leash. The girl darted into the street without looking, her pink raincoat a bright splash of color against the gray evening. The dog made it safely across, but the girl froze in the middle of the road as a delivery truck rounded the corner, its headlights illuminating her terrified face. Jackson didn't think. He dropped the groceries and ran. The world narrowed to a tunnel of sound and motion, the squeal of brakes, the honking horn, the splash of puddles under his feet. He reached the girl just as the truck skidded toward them, scooping her up and diving toward the opposite curb. They tumbled onto the wet grass of the roadside park, the truck missing them by inches. For a moment, Jackson just lay there, the child trembling in his arms, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. Then a woman was there sobbing, pulling the girl from his arms. "Sara! Oh my God, Sara!" The woman clutched her daughter, rocking back and forth. I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. Jackson sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in his shoulder where he'd hit the ground. "Is she okay?" The woman looked up at him, her face streaked with rain and tears. "Because of you, yes." She was in her early 50s, with short auburn hair now plastered to her head from the rain. "You saved my daughter's life." The little girl, Sara, peeked out from her mother's embrace. "I'm sorry, Mommy. Baxter got away, and I just wanted to catch him." "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay now." The woman looked back at Jackson. "I'm Elizabeth Harmon. This is my daughter, Sara." "Jackson Miller?" He got to his feet, grimacing slightly. "And it's fine. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Elizabeth said firmly. "They wouldn't have. You risked your life for my daughter." She fumbled in her purse. "Please, I want to." Jackson realized she was reaching for her wallet. "No," he said quickly. "No, please. I don't want anything. But you saved Sara. Your groceries are ruined. At least let me replace them." Jackson looked back at the parking lot where his groceries lay scattered, paper bags disintegrating in the rain. Milk pooled on the asphalt, mixing with rainwater. Tonight's dinner, tomorrow's lunch for Ethan, all gone. Money was tight, especially with Ethan's braces payment due next week. But something in him rebelled at the thought of taking money for what he'd done. "Really, it's fine," he insisted. "I'm just glad she's okay." Elizabeth studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "At least let me drive you home." "It's the least I can do." Jackson hesitated, then nodded. His shoulder was throbbing now, and the thought of walking the 8 blocks home in the rain wasn't appealing. As they drove, Sara sat quietly in the back seat, clutching the now subdued Baxter. Elizabeth kept glancing at Jackson, her hands tight on the steering wheel. "You're hurt," she said finally. "Just bruised. I'll be fine. Do you have family waiting for you?" "My son, Ethan. He's 14. And his mother?" Jackson looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets. "She passed away 3 years ago." Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." "It's okay. What about Sarah's father?" "He left when she was 2. It's been just us since then." They fell into silence until Jackson directed her to his modest bungalow. The lights were on inside. Ethan was home from basketball practice. "Thank you for the ride," Jackson said, opening the door. "Mr. Miller," Elizabeth said suddenly. "I own a small café downtown, Lizzie's Place. Please come by sometime. For coffee, at least." "On the house." Jackson smiled. "Maybe I will." "Good night, Elizabeth." "Good night, Sara." "Good night, Mr. Miller," Sara said softly. "Thank you for saving me." Jackson watched them drive away before turning toward his house, already dreading explaining to Ethan why there was no dinner. But when he opened the door, Ethan was on the phone, his face pale. "Dad! Where have you been? I've been calling and calling." Jackson reached for his pocket, realizing his phone must have fallen out during the rescue. "I'm sorry, buddy. There was an accident." "It's Grandpa," Ethan interrupted, his voice cracking. "He had a heart attack. The hospital's been trying to reach you." Jackson felt the world tilt beneath him. His father was all the family they had left. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital corridors, whispered consultations with doctors, and Ethan's frightened eyes following him everywhere. Jackson's father, Robert, had survived the heart attack, but would need bypass surgery, expensive surgery that his Medicare wouldn't fully cover. "Don't you worry about the money," Robert told him from his hospital bed. "I've got some savings." But Jackson knew better. His father had spent most of his retirement helping Jackson after Marie died, covering funeral expenses and keeping them afloat during those first terrible months when Jackson could barely function, let alone work. "We'll figure it out, Dad," Jackson promised, though he had no idea how. He took time off work to be at the hospital, which meant no paycheck. The construction company was understanding but couldn't afford paid leave. By the end of the week, Jackson was calculating how much he could get if he sold his car and started taking the bus. It was Ethan who reminded him about Elizabeth's cafe. "You said she offered free coffee, right? Maybe they're hiring. You used to work at that diner in college. Mom always said you made the best omelets." Jackson had forgotten about that. Those early morning shifts cooking breakfast to pay his way through trade school, Marie coming in after her night shifts at the hospital, falling in love over coffee and pancakes. "It's worth asking," Ethan pressed. "What's the place called again?" "Lizzie's Place," Jackson said. "But I can't just show up asking for a job." "Why not? The worst she can say is no." Jackson looked at his son, so much like Marie with his practical approach to problems, and nodded. "Okay. I'll stop by tomorrow." Lizzie's Place turned out to be a charming cafe in the arts district, with mismatched vintage furniture and local artwork on the walls. It was busy when Jackson arrived, the morning rush in full swing. He spotted Elizabeth behind the counter, efficiently working the espresso machine while calling out orders. He waited until there was a lull before approaching. "Elizabeth?" She looked up, confusion crossing her face before recognition dawned. "Jackson! You came." Her smile was warm, genuine. "Please sit down. Let me get you some coffee." "Actually," Jackson said, "I was wondering if you might be hiring. I have experience as a short-order cook and He stopped, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't come here to ask for a job. It's just that my father's in the hospital, and I've had to take time off work and—" "Breathe," Elizabeth said gently. "Sit down and tell me what's happening." Before he knew it, Jackson was telling her everything, about his father's heart attack, the looming surgery, the financial strain. Elizabeth listened without interrupting, her eyes compassionate. "As it happens, she said when he finished. My cook just gave notice. He's moving to Seattle next week. The timing couldn't be better. I don't want charity, Jackson said quickly. It's not charity. It's a job. With a salary and tips. She smiled. And I really do need a cook. Can you start Monday? Jackson felt something loosen in his chest, the first knot of tension unwinding. Yes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The morning rush is brutal. Her eyes twinkled. Now, how about that coffee I promised you? Working at Lizzie's place was different from construction, less physically demanding but more hectic. Jackson quickly fell into the rhythm of the kitchen, rediscovering skills he hadn't used in years. Elizabeth was a fair boss, firm but kind, and the other employees welcomed him warmly. Sara often came to the café after school, sitting at the counter with her homework while waiting for her mother to finish work. She was a serious child, thoughtful beyond her years. Jackson learned that she loved books, especially stories about brave girls having adventures. Like you, he teased one afternoon, sliding a plate of cookies toward her. Running into traffic to save your dog. Very brave, but maybe don't do it again. Sara giggled. Baxter is on a new leash now. Mom says it would take a tornado to get him loose. Ethan sometimes joined Sara at the counter, helping her with math problems or sharing music through split earbuds. Despite their age difference, they developed an easy friendship. Jackson would watch them from the kitchen, something warm and hopeful unfurling in his chest. Elizabeth noticed it too. They get along well, she commented one evening as they closed up the cafe. Ethan's always wanted a little sister, Jackson said without thinking, then felt his face heat up. I mean, Elizabeth laughed. I know what you meant. She hesitated. How's your father doing? Better. The surgery went well. He's in rehab now, building his strength back up. And the financial situation? Jackson shrugged. We're managing. This job helps more than you know. I'm glad. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. Jackson, would you and Ethan like to come over for dinner tomorrow? Sarah's been asking, and I make a decent lasagna. The invitation surprised him. We'd like that. Dinner at Elizabeth's comfortable townhouse became a regular occurrence. Sometimes Jackson cooked, sometimes Elizabeth. The kids would disappear after meals, Ethan introducing Sara to video games or helping with her science projects. Jackson and Elizabeth would linger at the table, talking about everything and nothing, books they'd read, movies they'd seen, the challenges of single parenthood. Do you ever think about dating again? Elizabeth asked one night, swirling the last of her wine in her glass. Jackson considered the question. I did briefly. About a year after Marie died. It was a disaster. What happened? I wasn't ready. I kept comparing her to Marie, which wasn't fair to either of them. He looked at Elizabeth. What about you? I've had a few relationships. Nothing that stuck. She smiled ruefully. Being a single mom with a business doesn't leave much time for romance. And Sara has to come first. As she should, Jackson agreed. But Sara's growing up. She won't need me forever. There was something in her voice that made Jackson look up. Elizabeth was watching him, her eyes soft in the candlelight. He felt a flutter of something he hadn't experienced in years, possibility. The moment was broken by Sara's laughter from the living room, followed by Ethan's good-natured groan. I think your daughter just beat my son at his favorite game, Jackson said. Elizabeth smiled. She's competitive. Gets that from me. As spring turned to summer, Jackson's father recovered enough to return to his own home, though Jackson and Ethan visited often. The financial pressure eased as Jackson continued working at the cafe, even picking up some weekend construction jobs as his father's medical bills were gradually paid off. His relationship with Elizabeth evolved slowly, cautiously. They were both wary of disrupting the delicate balance they'd created, the friendship between their children, the comfortable routine of their lives. But there were moments, a lingering touch when passing a plate, a shared look of understanding across the cafe, the way they gravitated toward each other in any room, that hinted at deeper feelings. It was Sara who finally pushed them forward. One Sunday afternoon, as the four of them walked through the park, Sara tugged on Jackson's hand. "Mr. Miller, do you like my mom?" Jackson nearly tripped over his own feet. "What? Do you like my mom?" Sara repeated patiently. "Because she likes you. She smiles different when you're around." Ahead of them, Elizabeth had stopped walking, her face flushed. Ethan was suddenly very interested in a nearby tree. "Sara," Elizabeth began. "That's not—" "It's okay, Mom. I like Mr. Miller. And I like Ethan. We could be like a family, couldn't we?" The simplicity of the child's question hung in the air between them. Jackson looked at Elizabeth, seeing his own uncertainty and hope reflected in her eyes. "I do like your mom, Sara," he said finally, his voice gentle. "Very much." "Good," Sara said decisively. "Because we like you too." She skipped ahead to join Ethan, leaving the adults standing awkwardly on the path. "Kids," Elizabeth said with a nervous laugh. "No filter. But often right," Jackson said quietly. He took a deep breath. "I do like you, Elizabeth. More than like. But I've been afraid to say anything. After Marie, I never thought I'd feel this way again." Elizabeth's eyes softened. "I know. It's scary, isn't it? Opening yourself up again." "Terrifying," Jackson agreed. "But maybe worth it." Elizabeth smiled, reaching for his hand. "Definitely worth it." Their first official date was dinner at a restaurant by the river, both of them awkward and nervous like teenagers. But by dessert, they'd relaxed into the easy conversation they'd always shared, with a new undercurrent of possibility humming between them. "I never thanked you properly," Elizabeth said as they walked along the riverfront afterward. "For what?" "For saving Sara that day. For refusing my money." Jackson shook his head. "Anyone would have." "No," Elizabeth interrupted firmly. "Not anyone. You. You ran toward danger without hesitation. You saved my daughter and then refused payment, even though I later learned you were struggling financially." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "That's who you are, Jackson. A man who does the right thing, not the easy thing." Jackson felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what needed doing. And that's why I'm falling in love with you," Elizabeth said softly. Jackson stared at her, his heart pounding. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "I'm falling in love with you too," he admitted. "And it scares me to death." Elizabeth laughed. "Me too. But I think we're brave enough to handle it, don't you?" As summer turned to fall, their relationship deepened. They moved cautiously, mindful of their children's feelings. But Ethan and Sara were their biggest supporters, exchanging knowing looks whenever their parents held hands or shared private smiles. There were challenges, of course. Jackson sometimes felt guilty, as if loving Elizabeth somehow diminished what he'd had with Marie. Elizabeth worried about Sara becoming too attached to Jackson and Ethan, only to be hurt if things didn't work out. They talked through these fears, sometimes late into the night after the children were asleep. Slowly, they built trust, in each other and in the future they might share. On the 1-year anniversary of their meeting, Jackson took Elizabeth back to the spot where he'd saved Sara. The rain had been replaced by golden autumn sunshine, the street peaceful in the late afternoon light. "It's hard to believe it happened right here," Elizabeth said, looking at the ordinary stretch of road. "That moment changed everything," Elizabeth said softly. "If you hadn't been here that day." Jackson squeezed her hand. "But I was. And now we're here together." He led her to a bench in the small park where they tumbled after the near accident. From his pocket he pulled out a small velvet box. Elizabeth's eyes widened. "Jackson, I'm not very good with words," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I know what I feel. This past year has taught me that life can surprise you when you least expect it. That love can find you again, even when you think that part of your life is over." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. Elizabeth Harmon, will you marry me? Tears filled Elizabeth's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. When they told the children that evening, Sara squealed with delight and threw her arms around both of them. Ethan tried to play it cool, but his wide smile gave him away. Does this mean Sara will be my sister for real? He asked. If that's okay with you, Jackson said. Ethan nodded. It's more than okay. It's awesome. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Elizabeth and Jackson sat on her porch swing, planning their future. I was thinking, Elizabeth said hesitantly, about the café. What about it? What if we expanded? Added a dinner menu? You're wasted on just breakfast and lunch. Your cooking is too good. Jackson considered this. It would mean longer hours, more staff. Yes, but also more income. And... She paused. I was thinking we could rename it. Miller and Harmon's has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Jackson felt a surge of emotion. You want me to be your partner in the business too? In everything, Elizabeth said simply. We're better together, Jackson. This past year has proven that. He kissed her, marveling at how his life had transformed in just 12 months. From the darkest period after Marie's death to this new beginning, all because he dropped his groceries and run toward danger instead of away from it. The wedding was a small affair, held in Elizabeth's backyard the following spring. Sara was the flower girl, scattering rose petals with solemn concentration. Ethan stood proudly as his father's best man. Jackson's father, now fully recovered, beamed from the front row. As they exchanged vows, Jackson thought about the journey that had brought them here. The grief that had nearly broken him after Marie died. The daily struggle to keep going for Ethan's sake. The random chance that put him in that parking lot on a rainy evening, in the right place at the right time to save a little girl in a pink raincoat. I promise to love you and our children with everything I have, he told Elizabeth, his voice steady despite the emotion tightening his throat. To build a life with you that honors the past but embraces the future. To be your partner, your friend, and your husband, for all the days we're given. Elizabeth's eyes shone with tears as she repeated her own vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sara and Ethan cheered louder than anyone. The reception was catered by the staff from their café, now officially renamed Miller and Harmon's, and expanding into the vacant space next door to accommodate dinner service. Jackson had quit construction entirely to focus on the business, discovering a passion for cooking he'd forgotten he had. As they danced under strings of fairy lights, Elizabeth rested her head on Jackson's shoulder. Happy? She asked. More than I ever thought possible again, he admitted. You and Sara have given me and Ethan a second chance at family. And you gave Sara her life, Elizabeth reminded him. That day in the rain. Jackson shook his head. I just reacted. Anyone would have. Stop saying that, Elizabeth interrupted with a laugh. Accept that you're a hero, Jackson Miller. Only if you accept that you're stuck with me now, Elizabeth Miller. She smiled up at him. Gladly. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the children had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from celebration, Jackson and Elizabeth stood in the kitchen of what was now their home. They'd decided to live in Elizabeth's townhouse, which had more space for their blended family. I have something for you, Elizabeth said, pulling a small package from a drawer. Jackson unwrapped it to find a framed photograph. Sara and Ethan laughing together on the porch swing, their heads bent over a book. Our family, Elizabeth said softly. The one we've built together. Jackson felt his throat tighten. It's perfect. And it all started because you refused to take my money, Elizabeth mused. What if you had? Would we be here now? I like to think we would, Jackson said. Some things are meant to be. The cafe expansion was completed by summer, and Miller and Harmon's quickly became known for its dinner menu featuring Jackson's creative comfort food. They hired additional staff, including a young chef named Miguel who became Jackson's protege. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier than before, but filled with purpose and joy. There were challenges, of course. Sara went through a phase of testing boundaries, struggling to adjust to having a stepfather after years of it being just her and her mother. Ethan had moments of missing his mom intensely, wondering if his father's new happiness somehow betrayed her memory. Jackson and Elizabeth navigated these waters carefully, with patience and understanding. They created space for grief alongside joy, honoring what came before while building something new. "Your mom would be proud of you," Jackson told Ethan one evening after watching him patiently help Sara with her science project. "She always said you had her compassionate heart." Ethan looked up, surprised. "You don't mind when I talk about Mom?" "Mind? Ethan, she'll always be part of our family. Nothing changes that. Elizabeth says the same thing about Sara's dad, even though he left." Jackson nodded. "She's right. Our past shapes us, good and bad. We don't forget it, we just make room for new chapters." As their first anniversary approached, Jackson planned a surprise. With Ethan and Sara's help, he arranged for Elizabeth's sister to watch the kids for a weekend while he took Elizabeth to the coast. "What's all this about?" Elizabeth asked as they drove toward the ocean. "Can't a man surprise his wife? This man? The one who color-codes the spice rack and plans meals a week in advance? That man is spontaneous now?" Jackson laughed. "I contain multitudes." The beach house he'd rented was small but charming, with a deck overlooking the water. As the sun set on their first evening, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jackson handed Elizabeth a gift-wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound book. Elizabeth opened it to find photographs, ticket stubs, handwritten notes, a chronicle of their relationship from that first rainy evening to their wedding day. "Jackson," she breathed, turning the pages slowly. "This is beautiful. There's room for more," he said, pointing to the blank pages at the back. "Many more years of memories." Elizabeth leaned against him, the book open in her lap. "I never expected this, you know. After David left, I thought that was it for me. I had Sara, my café, it was enough. I wasn't looking for more." "Neither was I," Jackson admitted. "After Marie died, I was just trying to survive each day. The idea of being happy again seemed impossible. And now?" He kissed her temple. "Now I know that life is full of unexpected turns. Some tragic, some miraculous. Like a single dad refusing money after saving a little girl? Exactly like that." They returned home renewed, ready to face the challenges of their growing business and blended family. The café was thriving, with reservations booked weeks in advance for dinner service. They were considering opening a second location across town. Sara, now 11, was blossoming into a confident young girl with her mother's determination and a newfound interest in cooking, spending hours in the kitchen with Jackson. Ethan, 15 and growing inches every month, had joined the high school basketball team and was talking about culinary school after graduation. "Like father, like son," Elizabeth teased one evening as they watched Ethan expertly flip pancakes for dinner. "He's better than I was at his age," Jackson said proudly. "More creative. He has a good teacher." Life wasn't perfect. There were arguments about curfews and chores, stressful days at the cafe, moments when grief would ambush one of them unexpectedly. But beneath it all was a solid foundation of love and trust, built day by day. On the second anniversary of their meeting, they returned to the spot where Jackson had saved Sara. It had become a tradition, a way to mark the moment that had changed everything. "I've been thinking," Elizabeth said as they sat on their bench, "about fate, or destiny, or whatever you want to call it. What about it? So many things had to align for us to be here now. You had to forget your reusable bags that day. I had to decide to take Sara to the park despite the rain. Baxter had to slip his leash at exactly that moment." Jackson nodded. "And I had to be stubborn enough to refuse your money." "Exactly. All these tiny decisions and coincidences led to this life we've built." Elizabeth squeezed his hand. "It makes me wonder about all the other lives we might have lived." "I like this one," Jackson said simply. "Me too." Elizabeth rested her head on his shoulder. "Very much." As they sat there, a young woman jogged past with a dog on a leash, a small terrier that looked remarkably like Baxter. She smiled at them as she passed, unaware of the significance of this spot to the couple on the bench. "Life goes on," Jackson murmured. "All around us, people are having their own moments that will change everything." "That's a nice thought," Elizabeth said. "That right now, someone else might be at their turning point. I hope they recognize it when it happens." "Like you did?" Jackson laughed. "I had no idea what I was starting when I ran into that street. I just knew I couldn't let anything happen to that little girl in the pink raincoat." "My hero," Elizabeth said, only half teasing. "Always," Jackson promised. That evening, they hosted a family dinner at home, Jackson's father, Elizabeth's sister and her husband, and the children. As Jackson moved around the kitchen, preparing the meal with Ethan's help, he caught glimpses of the life he never expected to have. Elizabeth laughing with her sister, Sara showing her grandfather her science fair medal, the house full of warmth and conversation. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were in bed, Jackson and Elizabeth sat on the porch swing, a blanket draped over their laps against the evening chill. "I've been thinking about expanding the café again," Elizabeth said. "The space next door is available now." "What did you have in mind?" "A bakery section. Fresh bread, pastries. Maybe cooking classes in the evenings." Jackson considered this. "It would mean hiring more staff. Taking on more debt." "True. But I think we're ready. The dinner service is consistently booked solid, and your seasonal menus have gotten write-ups in 3 different food blogs." "Our seasonal menus," Jackson corrected. "This is a partnership, remember?" Elizabeth smiled. "How could I forget? Miller and Harmon's." "I like the sound of that," Jackson said. "Always have." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the swing moving gently back and forth. From inside came the faint sound of Sara laughing at something in her dream, a light, carefree sound that never failed to warm Jackson's heart. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd taken my money that day?" Elizabeth asked suddenly. Jackson thought about it. "I'd like to think we'd still have found our way to each other. But maybe it would have been different. Maybe we'd just be acquaintances who nodded hello at school functions. I'm glad you were too stubborn to take it then." "Me too." Jackson pulled her closer. "Though if I'd known what I was turning down, a beautiful wife, an amazing stepdaughter, a successful business, I might have been tempted." Elizabeth laughed. "No, you wouldn't. That's not who you are, Jackson Miller. You don't do things for reward. The reward found me anyway," he said softly. As they headed inside, hand in hand, Jackson thought about the long, winding path that had led him here. The grief that had nearly broken him. The daily struggle to rebuild a life for himself and Ethan. The split-second decision to run toward danger instead of away from it. And now this, a full house, a thriving business, a love he'd never expected to find again. All because he'd refused a stranger's money after saving her child. Some might call it fate or destiny. Jackson preferred to think of it as life's unexpected gift, a second chance he hadn't known to ask for but had somehow been given anyway. In the quiet of their bedroom, Elizabeth already asleep beside him, Jackson whispered a thank you to whatever forces had aligned to bring them together. For the rain that day, for the forgotten reusable bags, for the dog that slipped its leash, for the little girl in the pink raincoat who now called him Dad. Sometimes the smallest moments contained the greatest possibilities. Sometimes a single act of courage could open the door to a future you never imagined. Sometimes refusing money was the richest decision you could make. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about everyday heroes and unexpected connections. Remember that the smallest actions can sometimes lead to the greatest changes in our lives. Share in the comments if you've ever experienced a moment that unexpectedly changed everything for you.